Okay, now let's look at section 7.3, which is over the four general decision-making styles. Now, decision-making style, we'll go ahead and define that, reflects the combination of how an individual perceives and responds to information. One model of decision-making styles bases it on two dimensions. Value orientation, the extent to which a person focuses on either task and technical concerns or people and social concerns. Tolerance ambiguity, the extent to which a person has a high need for structure or control in his or her own life. Now, combining the two dimensions creates four styles of decision making. Okay, using this figure here, let's take a look at our four styles of decision making here, that being the directive, analytical, conceptual, and behavioral. Okay, we'll first look at the directive decision making style here in the bottom left corner. Now, with the directive style, we have that they have a low tolerance for ambiguity and are oriented toward task and technical concerns. They can also be autocratic and focus on the short run. As we move up to the analytical, we can see that they like a lot of information and alternative choices and may overanalyze the situation. Analyticals, they take a longer to make decisions but also respond well to new or uncertain situations. As we move to the right, the conceptual decision-making style. Now, they have a high tolerance for ambiguity and focus on the people, social aspects of a work situation. They adopt a long-term perspective and rely on intuition and discussions with others to acquire information. This style can foster an indecisive approach to decision-making. Lastly, we have the behavioral. Now, with the behavioral decision-making style, they work well with others. They are supportive and receptive to suggestions. Because they tend to be non-confrontational, they may adopt a wishy-washy approach to decision-making. Now, as you look at this, you may wonder, which style do you have? Well, very few people have only one dominant decision-making style. There is not a best decision-making style that applies to all situations. You can use this knowledge of styles to understand yourself, influence others, and deal with conflict in the organization. For quite a while now, we see a lot of high-profile scandals in businesses, different organizations, and those have spurred interest in ethical decision-making. So you may hear that term in your organization getting thrown around, or possibly training in ethical decision-making. Because of that, many companies now have an ethics officer or an ethics compliance officer, which is someone trained about the matters of ethics in the workplace, particularly about resolving ethical dilemmas. Managers now may or must try to make sure their decisions are not just lawful, but also ethical. Now, to help managers make ethical decisions, a decision tree or a graph of decisions and their possible consequences may be helpful. We'll take a look at a sample of that right here. Once again, a decision tree is a graph of decisions and their possible consequences. It's used to create a plan to reach a goal. When confronted with a decision, a manager should ask several questions as well. And you can see how that is played out here in this decision tree. Is the proposed action legal? Yes or no? If yes, then does it maximize shareholder value? If it doesn't, we say no. We go down and say, would it be ethical not to take the action? And then we answer yes or no to that. So you can study this ethical decision tree and see how that might help you in making your decisions in an organization. People have an immune system of the mind which blunts bad feelings and smooths out euphoric ones. This can help make it easier for you to make difficult decisions. We look at 7.5 here now, how to overcome barriers in decision making. And when confronted with a challenge in the form of a problem or an opportunity, individuals may respond in perhaps 4 ineffective ways and 3 effective ones. Those 4 ineffective responses to decision situation are listed here. Relaxed avoidance, relaxed change, defensive avoidance, and panic. Now, with relaxed avoidance, you think of this as there's no point in doing anything. Nothing bad is going to happen. In this situation, a manager decides to take no action in the belief that there will be no great negative consequences. This is a form of complacency, and you've probably seen this in the workplace. The next ineffective response to a decision situation is relaxed change. You can think of this as a why not just take the easiest way out type attitude. A manager realizes that complete inaction will have negative consequences, but opts for the first available alternative that involves a low risk. This is kind of a form of satisficing. The third is defensive avoidance, and this attitude is kind of a there's no reason for me to explore other solution alternatives type attitude. A manager can't find a good solution and follows by procrastinating, perhaps passing the buck, or even denying the risk of any negative consequences. This is a denial of responsibility for taking action. And the last response is the response of panic, such as, oh, this is so stressful, I've got to do something, anything to get rid of the problem. Now, in this type of situation, a manager is so frantic to get rid of the problem that he or she just can't deal with the situation realistically. Now, your judgment may be so clouded that you won't be able to accept help in dealing with this problem. Now, on the flip side of this, we have 3 effective reactions in deciding to decide. And in deciding to decide, a manager agrees that he or she must decide what to do about a problem or opportunity and take effective decision-making steps. To help others whether to decide, evaluate the problem, such as importance, how high a priority is this situation, credibility, how believable is the information about the situation, and we look at urgency, how quickly must I act on the information about this situation. Now we talk about our common decision-making biases. We talk about heuristics, which are strategies that simplify the process of making decisions but can also be barriers to high-quality decision-making. You've also probably heard the term rule of thumb, so heuristics are also called rules of thumb. Now we'll look at the 6 common decision-making biases here. The first one we have is the availability bias, and this is using only the information available. Managers tend to give more weight to more recent behavior and use information readily available from memory to make judgments. Readily available information may not present a complete picture of the whole situation. Next, we talk about confirmation bias, which is seeking information to support one's point of view. This occurs when people seek information to support the point of view and discount data that does not support that point of view. Though this type of bias would seem to be obvious, people practice it all the time. The third is representativeness bias. Now this is generalizing from a small sample or a single event. Just because something happened once, that doesn't mean it will happen again or that it will happen to you. The fourth is the sunk cost bias. Money already spent seems to justify continuing. Now this occurs when managers add up all the money already spent on a project and conclude it's too costly to simply abandon it. If people have an aversion of wasting money, they continue to push on with an iffy looking project to justify the money that they've already sunk into it. The fifth is the anchoring and adjustment bias, which is the tendency to make decisions based on an initial figure. The bias is that the initial figure may be irrelevant to market realities. And lastly, we have the escalation of commitment bias. Now, this is a feeling overly invested in a decision. Decision makers increase their commitment to a project despite negative information about it. According to the prospect theory, decision makers find the notion of an actual loss more painful than giving up on the possibility of some far outreach gain. Now we'll move into the last part of our chapter, and this is over group decision making. Obviously, how to work well with others. Now, research suggests that the best individual acting alone can make a better decision than a group. However, groups make better decisions than most individuals acting alone. And of course, with this, we have advantages and disadvantages, so we'll take a look at the advantages of group decision making. First of all, we have a greater pool of knowledge, having multiple individuals adding information into the decision. Next, we have different perspectives because people have different backgrounds. Intellectual stimulation because with more people around, they have different ideas. Better understanding of decision rationale, and our last one is a deeper commitment to the decision. As people are part of a group, they get more invested, and as they are vested into the project, they are more committed to seeing its success. Now to the disadvantages of group decision making. Here we can have, at times, a few people try to dominate or intimidate other members of the group. You could have groupthink occur, which is when group members strive for agreement among themselves for the sake of unanimity and avoid accurately assessing the decision situation. We've already talked about this before. We have satisficing. This is seeking a decision that is good enough rather than the best decision to be made. And then lastly, we have goal displacement, which is when others' considerations than the primary goal rise to the fore, such as rivals trying to win an argument. Now you as a manager should know this information about groups and decision making. They are less efficient. Groups take longer to make decisions because it's more than just an individual coming to a decision. Group size affects decision quality. The larger the group, the lower the quality of the decision. And groups may be too confident, and it can lead to groupthink, which we previously discussed. And lastly, knowledge counts. Decision-making accuracy is higher when group members know a good deal about the relevant issues, or if the group leader can weigh members' opinions. Now, managers should also consider using certain guidelines in using groups in decision-making. When it can increase quality, when it can increase acceptance, and when it can increase development. So when it can increase quality, if additional information would increase the quality of the decision, involve those people who would provide the needed information. I mentioned when it can increase acceptance, involve those individuals whose acceptance and commitment are important. And lastly, I mentioned when it can increase development, involve those individuals whose development in your organization is important. Let's talk a little bit about group problem-solving techniques when you're trying to reach for consensus. Using groups to make decisions generally requires that they reach consensus. And consensus occurs when members are able to express their opinions and reach an agreement to support the final decision. It does not mean that all group members agree with the decision, only that they are willing to work towards its success. We also have another problem-solving technique is brainstorming, which is a technique that used to help groups generate multiple ideas and alternatives for solving their problems. Now, the technique consists of having members of a group meet and review a problem to be resolved. Individual members are then asked to silently generate ideas, which are then collected and written on a board, after which they are critiqued and evaluated. A variation of this is called electronic brainstorming or brainwriting, in which group members come together over a computer network to generate those ideas. And lastly, we talked about two computer-aided decision-making processes here. The two types of those are chauffeur-driven. A chauffeur-driven system asks participants to answer predetermined questions on electronic keypads. These are used as polling devices, allowing responses to be computer tabulated almost instantly, giving you those immediate feedback. With group-driven systems, participants express their ideas anonymously on a computer network, and results are projected on a large screen for all to see. And computer-aided decision-making can produce greater quantity and quality of ideas rather than the traditional brainstorming. However, the use of an online chat group leads to decreased group effectiveness and increased time to complete tasks. That concludes the lecture for the individual and group decision making from Chapter 7. Hopefully you'll go back in there and I know there's a lot of information there. The chapter's kind of all across the board. We have terms ranging from analytics, we've got decision trees, heuristics, sunk cost bias and different biases, participative management, so many terms in there. So definitely take a lot of time to reread that and see if you can't remember those terms and what the definitions are, all the parties that were involved, and as you go towards making individual and group decision making in your organization as a manager, hopefully it'll make things a lot easier. Thanks for joining.